Hello, my name is Dr. Rob Yeung. I'm a performance psychologist and a coach at a consultancy called Talent Space, and I'd like to talk to you about how you can solve problems more effectively. So sometimes people think of a problem as a term that applies only to those massive problems and difficulties that we face in life. But really, we can use problem-solving methodology to deal with all sorts of projects and assignments whenever we want to deal with things more efficiently and effectively. So I'm going to talk you through 3 phases that generally help people to solve problems and deal with opportunities more effectively. So the first step is something called fact-finding and problem identification. So rather than just jumping to conclusions and coming up with some kind of hurried plan for dealing with things, this is about slowing down and understanding the issue more. For example, recently a client organisation got in touch with me and asked me to run a series of lunchtime and evening workshops for some of their managers. Now, I could easily have put together a plan, but rather than doing that, I engaged in some fact-finding. For example, I asked the clients, who is coming along? Are they experienced managers or are they very junior people? Is English their first language? What are the objectives for running these training workshops? And what constraints do you have in terms of the organisation's culture and, for example, budget? So by understanding a problem more, you slow down and you can tackle it more effectively. The second step is then something called divergent thinking, which is about expanding the scope of inquiry. So again, rather than jumping into creating a plan of action, this is about coming up with options, considering possibilities for what you might do. So this is when you might come up with ideas, when you might look at old notes of projects that you've run before, you might do some online research, or perhaps talk to colleagues. And this is about coming up with options that you can then evaluate. Then, if you are dealing with a slightly larger problem, I suggest leaving it aside for perhaps a day or 2. And then you can come back to it and do what's known as convergent thinking. So this is starting to weed your possibilities down, narrowing the field down until you come down to one final plan of action. For example, when I start coaching an individual client, I often ask them to write a summary, a couple of pages on their situation, the problems they're facing, and ask them to do this in 2 sittings. So firstly, I ask them to do some divergent thinking, just to write anything that occurs to them. Then I ask them to set it aside and to come back to it, and that's when they can amend and edit it and hopefully come up with something that's a more insightful, deeper understanding of the situation and the problems facing them. So that's the convergent thinking part. Finally, when you have your plan, what you need to do is think about what the sort of common constraints might be. So what costs might be involved, not only in terms of financial, monetary costs, but non-financial costs such as people's time. Think about who you need to get involved with your project in terms of input and advice, who might block the project and how you might get them on side and so on. Then I think that it's a good idea to actually just get started with your plan, because most of the time it's a good idea to get started so you can get some feedback and learn as you go along and be flexible and change your plan. Because the danger of waiting too long when you're facing a problem is that the problem could get worse, or if it's an opportunity that you're trying to pursue, the opportunity may simply go away.